everybody, this is Bevin. Welcome to Bevin, a femme over 40 and her friends podcast. I'm your host, Bevin. I've said my name 3 times. It's time to start the show. This is my co-host, Biscuit Reynolds, who has declined to appear in this episode so far. Today I wanted to talk about, I haven't done a solo episode in a long time, and part of it is just because I've been working through a lot and like trying to figure out who I am and what I'm doing in this lifetime. But also, I don't know. Whatever, you lay fallow for the times that you need to lay fallow. But I thought this was an important episode because I actually know many people right now who are going through the process of experiencing cancer alongside your loved one as a primary support person. I had the experience of walking through breast cancer with my ex-fiance, the treatment of which was probably about a year, almost a year from diagnosis to finished treatment. But the experience of our entire partnership was flavored by that experience, right? And I think I just wanted to share my heart about the experience of it and like what I found helpful, and in hindsight, like what I wish I had known more about in order to like help anybody out there who might be going through this. I also have a couple of blog posts about the cancer experience that I published closer to when this was all going down, because this was like 2013 through 2014, so almost 10 years ago. It's wild. Time will march on. Time's gonna go by whether you're planning for it or not, so you might as well be intentional, right? Anyway, so I'll put links to those also in the show notes for this episode. But the first thing that I think everyone experiences that I think is the most maddening about the cancer experience, and it was very different going through it as a caregiver versus just as a friend of someone who had cancer. I've had lots of friends who've had cancer, who've both survived cancer and who have died from cancer as an adult, but like it was night and day to being in the thick of it with somebody. I was fortunate at the time to be working from home and for myself, so I was able to go to every single one of my partner's doctor appointments and chemo infusions. I didn't go to all the radiation appointments. Those were daily. And they were all the way on the Upper East Side, and I was living in Brooklyn, so it didn't really make sense. But by then it was like a little bit more routine. So walking through all of that was a lot. I want to talk about uncertainty now and a little bit later in this episode, because I've actually been learning a lot about uncertainty recently. That's kind of a big thing I've been talking about in therapy a lot. Shout out to therapy. But uncertainty, like as soon as you get a cancer diagnosis, it's like the TSA door in the airport. Like once you walk through it, you can't go back out. The scanxiety that you get, that's a word I learned from a cancer survivor. Like every time you have to go back in for a scan, the anxiety comes back of, is the cancer back, right? And I know people who have had cancer and survived it, and I know people who have had cancer, survived a couple rounds of cancer, and then the third round is what took them out. Life is one of those things where it's like uncertainty is life. We don't get out without uncertainty. Like it's just something that I think frequently we think we're avoiding it. And there's this like sense of safety that we buy into. Like think about a job, right? It feels really safe, but like when you realize that you're an at-will employee, you can get laid off or fired at any moment. That's not actually certainty. That's just temporary experiences of safety, right? Like, and so I think there is an element of reckoning that comes with the uncertainty of a cancer diagnosis. Like, hopefully we'll make it, like let's go step by step. High five for self-care. I just drank some water. So stay hydrated. That's my anti-cancer tip for you. I've actually learned a lot. Oh my God. Because like when I'm feeling uncertain, I want to lean into what I can control, which like knowledge, sure. I'm a Capricorn with a Virgo rising. I want to learn it all. And so I really leaned into learning a lot about what prevents cancer reoccurrence. Hydration is a big one. Obviously how you nutrient yourself is part of that too. And I read a really great book called Cancer Hates Tea. And it talked about how tea, which I love, primarily green tea actually, is like an incredible antioxidant source that actually fights cancer. Cancer loves sugar. So if you're willing to lean into tea, and release sugar, that gives you more of a chance. But I also have learned that your body treats sugar, treats stress like sugar. So it elevates, like when you're under stress, it elevates your blood sugar levels. So it's like you could have eaten a cupcake, or you just stress yourself out. And, you know, it's just one of those things when you really learn how like our physiological bodies, like with the nutrition that we actually need versus what mainstream whatever wants to teach us. You learn a lot about that kind of stuff. So so there was a lot of uncertainty in the early part of the diagnosis, partially because there was nothing they could tell us. Like we knew there was a lump. We didn't know yet how big it was or what was in it until surgery happened. So we had to wait until surgery happened. And even then, like, I will also say, why caretaking someone or loving someone who's going into surgery is such a powerless feeling. It was really like, her dad had gone through treatment for stomach cancer, which he passed away right after her last chemo treatment. It was really devastating. And he had had cancer 5 years previous. And so he eventually passed away from side effects of the treatment that he got for the stomach cancer. So it's like the cancer didn't get him, but it sort of did, right? And so her mom and dad were with us for the first surgery. And I couldn't, like, as soon as she was wheeled out, I was like, I can't believe you went through this 6 times, because he had 6 different cancer surgeries. And then, of course, like, we're waiting for the results to come back, and like, really excited to find out, like, what's the treatment schedule going to be, because we wouldn't know that until the surgery stuff came back. So it comes back, and we have to go back in again. So they had to do the whole surgery again, because the margins weren't clear, which meant that there was still cancer or precancerous cells on the outside of the lump that they took out. So they went back in. We had a whole nother surgery. It wasn't the big hullabaloo like it was the first time, because people didn't fly out for it. But it was the same exact thing. But what was helpful is I had already been through it, right? We had already walked through that. So we kind of knew what to expect. So it's like I say in my aerobics class all the time, is like, we cheer for awkward, because when you're out of your comfort zone, you're doing something new, that's where you grow. And so sometimes when you go back through something you've already been through, you have the confidence of the experience of having done it before. So it felt like that was kind of helpful. Having already gone through the surgery, it felt, I mean, it's still like, I don't know if my loved one's going to be okay on the other side of surgery, but she was, and I was grateful for that. And then after that second surgery, we finally found out, okay, it's going to be chemo with this kind of drug for the first 6 weeks, and then chemo with the second kind of drug for the next 6 weeks. So I'm pretty sure it was 3 months total. Something that I wanted to talk about this was just like caretaking the caretaker, because caretaking is actually really hard for a lot of us. I'm pointing at myself, because you're in control when you're giving. Like, people overgive sometimes because they want to control, and that's, you know, a fear response. It's a perfectionism response. It's just a way to like control your environment if you've had an experience of, like, you know, trauma where you were not in control of what was going on, right? And so I've had to really learn how to receive in this life. That has been an ongoing lesson. And so when you're caretaking someone else, I want you to make sure that you are giving care to yourself, not just self-care, but also like requesting the care. A friend of mine did this little like PSA about when you go to the emergency room, there's the person having the emergency, the person supporting the person in the emergency, and then ideally you have a third person who's supporting the person who's supporting the person in the emergency, because there's so much you need, right? Like, humans are interdependent by nature. Like, we're supposed to be connected to each other. We're ideally supposed to be living in villages of about 150 to 200 people. Like, that's how our bodies are wired. We're wired for human connection. The reason why we're bipeds, meaning we walk on 2 legs, is because we were able to evolve because we were tribal. Because mothers or gestational parents next 3 months after you give birth is like very vulnerable and could not be survived unless people were bringing food and providing protection, right? Like, that's just how it used to work. And so evolutionarily, like, we're stuck like this. We're stuck needing each other. I know it's so much easier to be separated from humans and all of their traumatized ways. But I think the work is discernment and compassion and how to carry both of those things. and be kind to ourselves and give ourselves what we need in order to support people our best. And so as a caretaker, I would suggest getting help. Even if you think, oh, I can handle it. I put together one of those meal things for my partner. And what was super helpful about that was that it gave, first of all, it was like precursor to COVID times because we had to be very immuno aware because her immune system was suppressed, right? And so like we had to be really aware of like, if you're sick, don't come, like, right? Like, because I don't want her to die because a friend came to visit. But we did that, and it was nice because it gave me like 2 or 3 hours where someone would be there to connect with her. She's an extrovert, so she needed that kind of energetic attention. I'm more of an introvert, kind of an ambivert, and so I needed the downtime. I needed the ability to go out and run around and do whatever I needed to do. And it's not like she needed full-time care or anything like that, but I was kind of handling all the household stuff. And running a couple of businesses and like living my life. So I was really glad I did that, even though I hesitated to like set something up. It did make sense, and it was a great way for her to stay connected to friends and for her friends to help out with something. Because, you know, it's the basic human need. Here's the thing about being sick. Being sick is like a full-time job. Navigating the health system, navigating insurance, all of that, right? And so like as many hands as you can make light work, right? So just setting that up. I also, I got a lot of good resources from people, and there was a thing called the Lesbian Cancer Initiative in New York at the time, and so they provided free counseling. So I got a counselor for the first time. I'd never had counseling before, and I had a counselor for that experience. And it was so helpful to have someone who I didn't have to explain the gay stuff to, and I didn't have to explain the cancer stuff to, and who in fact could explain a lot of cancer stuff to me because she had so much experience working with patients who were caregivers of folks with cancer. And so she said something to me that I have never forgotten, which is that my partner didn't want to go to a cancer support group because she was worried it would be full of naysaying cancer people. And my therapist was like, oh, that's a lot of hubris to say that, because she's like, in my experience, people approach cancer the way they approach their life. So some people are optimists and have an optimistic outlook, and our family ethic around that time, me and my partner, was like full optimism, like full positivity, and like on the edge of spiritual bypassing, which I didn't even know what that word meant at the time. But on the edge of like just being so positive, we're not looking at anything, but like it was what she needed in order to feel like she could keep fighting. And so I respect people who know what they need. And, but my therapist was like, yeah, like there's lots of positive people who deal with cancer, and there's negative people, and they're not necessarily always in the same group. So like, anyway, so that's something interesting. And when she said that to me, I started like really sitting back and like kind of observing the people I saw going through cancer. And I was like, yeah, that tracks. Like people really do approach cancer the way they approach life. The thing that I would suggest anybody, whether you have the cancer or you're the supporter of people with cancer, is asking, what's the lesson in this for me? Because we are always presented with things with lessons. And I think when we have soul contracts with people that I believe we sign before we even show up on the earth plane, which, by the way, the earth, of all the places we can incarnate, earth is the hardest. So if you're a person who's on some kind of personal growth plan and like wants to grow, you're in the top 2% of people on earth, right? You pick the hardest place and you're choosing to grow and learn your lessons. A lot of people give up and don't learn any lessons. So if things are coming up, and if things are coming up again and again, that's a really great opportunity to just sit with your journal and just be like, what is the lesson in this for me? And to lean into that. I would also trust, like, not just taking breaks, but like trust your capacity. Like, you can't be everything for one person, and like, you can try, but you will fail, right? Like, you kind of got to only give from your overflow, in my opinion. I've definitely given, I never had that, like, when I was doing this cancer caregiving, I didn't have that frame of mind. And I would do stuff like, I'd have a self-care day where I'd like go take a yoga class, and then I would have like a full panic attack after the yoga class and like feel this like massive anxiety. And I'm like, I just did yoga. Why am I feeling like this? And what it turned out is that I have this great trauma response where I'm your girl in a crisis. I do not feel my feelings when it doesn't feel safe to feel them. And so, but what is always true about your emotions is that they have to be felt at some point. And in order to heal, you have to hurt. You have to feel those feelings. And so I rested and relaxed my body enough so that I could feel safe to feel all of the panic and anxiety I wasn't feeling at the time when I was going through it. So first of all, that was my first experience taking a Klonopin. I had a friend who was just like, take this. And I was like, wow, this actually does feel better. But I also know it's better to just like process your feelings as they come through and to be more of a safe place for that. And now, as someone who is like living a chill life and really working on healing my nervous system, I feel things coming through that are stuff I couldn't feel 30 years ago. So like, you know, part of healing is the process of like, oh, my body is safe now for these feelings to come through. Isn't that a compliment in some ways? Anyway, just being okay with any feeling that comes through is actually really beautiful. But getting the emotional support, that's what was really helpful with that experience with that therapist, was like going through all of the things, right? Like it is incredibly hard to think that your loved one might die imminently from a thing. And here's the truth about death. Only 10 to 20% of death isn't anticipated. Everything else is something you get a little bit of a heads up on. So I think in some ways it can be very sacred and beautiful to recognize the death process like a birth process, where there is, like with a birth, typically you get some lead time to anticipate the birth and the shift from going into the portal between life and death, right? And like bringing that new entity into the world, right? And I think we meaning society, we meaning all of us growing here together, would be better served to look at death as a life process, and an actually really beautiful one at that, which gives us a lot of perspective, I think. And I think also as a person who, by the time I was in my 30s, had lost so many friends, I have a different perspective on like temporality and like how precious every present moment is, and how unique every present moment is, even if it feels like it's the same thing all the time. Like then something like cancer will show up and change everything, right? The process of, oh man, I had to learn how to not take stuff personally too. Like I remember one time I did all this effort to like make a little chemo picnic for our chemo day. And then of course my partner got sick from the picnic, you know what I mean? And it was just like, I can't take that personally. Like that's just the way her body is like literally shutting down, because, oh man, the head nurse at the chemo center in Brooklyn that she went to, we went through, I want to say it was Sloan Kettering, but now I'm like not 100% sure, but I'm pretty sure it was Sloan Kettering in New York City. Very good cancer organization, really good culture. Like the people were super nice. But the head nurse at the infusion center that we were going to said, we're going to look back on this in 100 years and see it as barbaric, the way we see leeches and bloodletting now. And I agree, actually. And it's funny because we weren't like 100% sold on doing chemo. I mean, I was going to support my partner doing whatever she wanted to do, but like we wanted to like kind of explore other options. But when we met with the oncologist after the surgery, so like you get a surgeon, you meet with the surgeon, you have surgery, and then you meet with the oncologist, who then sets up like chemo and radiation, right? And then you meet with a radiologist. And so the oncologist said, this is your shot at having curative care. If you get cancer again, we're going to call it palliative, which is just making it easy for you to die. And like that, those words sold chemo immediately. That was like, it was like, I don't know how much the insurance company paid for all that chemo, but it was probably $100,000 easily. And that was the sale, you know? And so, what I would do now, and what we talked about actually years later, is I would not myself get chemo. I've just seen what it does to people's bodies, and that's not how I want to live. I would choose to fight, with cannabis and plant medicines, not with poison. And that's just my preference from having walked through it with somebody so intimately. You know, I just don't think it's worth it. I don't think the quality of life is there, and I don't think the long-term benefits are there. After the cancer experience and the cancer treatment was over, the drugs she had to take to prevent a recurrence of breast cancer was, and I don't remember, I know her, like, she was like stage 2, borderline stage 3. I remember the tumor was 2.7 inches, and I don't remember anything else about like the specifics of what kind of cancer she had. But it was just so rough, you know. And like then the drugs ended up creating a condition in her uterus where like she was going to be at high risk of uterine cancer. So we had a uterine cancer scare. And then they said, well, let's just take the uterus out. But they never mentioned an oophorectomy, which is your ovaries. And you're more likely to get ovarian cancer if you've already had breast cancer. And I was like, why wouldn't they suggest that? You know what I mean? I'm like, just take them all out. And I had heard this when I was a lawyer. I heard this in a real estate closing once. I got a lot of good wisdom in real estate closings. This woman was like, if you ever have a hysterectomy, have them take the ovaries out too, because it's not worth the hormonal meow meow that you deal with. And so I was like, that little nugget of information like sailed from my days in New York to me in LA. This is when that was happening. And I was like, you got to get the ovaries out too. So I'm glad all of that happened at once. But a hysterectomy is also no joke. It's another lengthy surgery, and it's a lengthy recovery process. But I'm glad that happened too. But it was just like another cancer scare because of the meds she was taking to prevent a recurrence of breast cancer. So anyway, it's just like perpetual uncertainty, perpetual anxiety that we have to learn how to live with and how to thrive in spite of. And that's kind of what I've continued to do, honestly, in terms of following my own spiritual flow and resonance path, is like, how can I regulate my nervous system in spite of not having that quote unquote certainty? You know what I mean? Like, I went to law school because I wanted to have a path. I wanted to have a thing that I could say that I was doing. And I really regret that now, instead of learning and building those uncertainty muscles back when I was in my 20s, you know? And like, but I don't think I had the strength to do something different at that time. I think I've been training to be an outsider my whole life. And like, I'm finally like really leaning on those skills to just be like, it's okay if I do things different than people. And it's okay if my path doesn't make sense to anybody but me. And it even kind of doesn't make sense to me most of the time. But my relationship with my intuition only gets stronger. And so I trust that there are things that are keeping me safe and helping me know what I need to know. And that I know that also that I will never abandon myself again. And I did a lot of self-abandonment in that relationship that I'm talking about now. You can listen to episode 2. That'll tell you everything you need to know. But I did learn a lot in that relationship. And I will say this, our shared value in our partnership was fun. Like, we were all about making things fun. Like, so every time we made it a game, actually, every time we had a doctor's appointment, we would try to take a funny photo, which like, just like, it gave us something to do. It kind of distracted us. And I think humor is a really beautiful way that we get through life. And like, honestly, like, once I turned 40, I was like, I am not interested in people that are not making me laugh. You know what I mean? I just want to laugh more in the rest of this life. It's not worth it. It's not so serious as I once thought it was. In fact, fun is serious. It's important. It's one of my core values, even still. So I think finding ways to create the cancer journey as an adventure is really helpful. But also like remembering that like it's not all up to you, you know, like it's not, I took it all on my shoulders as a good Virgo rising Capricorn sun, you know, like I took it all on my shoulders. I took a lot of responsibility, which I felt like I needed to do at the time, and I don't think I needed to do it. But I don't know. It's like this, it's the good girl thing when you're raised to believe, oh, if you're just good enough or perfect enough, you'll be safe, you know, all of that. So, let's see, what else is in my notes? A needs assessment. This is something I did when I was trying to figure out how to, get support, rally the community for support. Was just like going through and kind of figuring out what your needs are. Are your needs meals? Are your needs to have the dog walked? Because honestly, that was just really helpful to just not have that on our plate. Meals, things like that. Like just like really getting clear about like what are the needs, and then what are the things I have to take care of versus what can someone else take care of. And I learned this nugget. This is true for delegation, not just in cancer treatment, but in like employment and all of those things. Is like if someone can do it 80% of how you would do it, that is plenty enough, right? And then also if you're delegating something, 10, 80, 10, which is getting someone started, spending the first 10% with them and like helping them figure it out, letting them keep going for the next 80%, and then joining in for the last 10%, right? and I think it's the same for laundry as project management, like that can help get things going in the way that is most helpful for you. I think that's everything I had on my notes. I hope this helps. Like, I don't know, like nobody ever died of awkward and nobody ever dies of uncertainty. It just is really hard to bear unless you have tools to do it. My favorite thing to do when I'm feeling uncertain about things is just to dance and to get in the present moment and just be mindful. And mindfulness is really just being present where you are. And yeah, I think getting more, it was helpful for me to hear a lot of people's cancer experiences. So I hope that this helps somebody out there. The best way to support this podcast is through my Patreon page, Patreon, patreon.com/FKDP, which stands for Fat Kid Dance Party, which is my aerobics class for anyone who feels left behind by mainstream fitness. If you've ever been called too much, too fat, or felt too awkward to dance, mine is the supportive class for you. You get access to all of my Zoom aerobics classes at any level of support. I also have an on-demand membership where you can work out with me at any time. There's more than 20 aerobics classes available for you in that membership. I also have a rental library, so if you don't want to be a member, you can just rent a class, and that is, if you go to fatkiddanceparty.com and click Let's Party, it'll give you all the options, and the rental library is there. And also you can book to work with me one-on-one. I do Reiki. I'm a Reiki master healer, and I actually got Reiki certified on my level 1 because of my partner going through breast cancer, because I was like, I want a thing I can do, even though Reiki is like energy healing, which you can't see, right? But like, it's a thing that I could do, that I could offer and help. So I can also do Reiki with you, and I can also do business brainstorming and all sorts of other things. So work one-on-one with me, or support the podcast through Patreon, or you could just send me a little Venmo tip. I receive it all. I am really learning how to receive in this life. I love you so much. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for liking and subscribing and all of the things. And if you have solo episode requests or anything like that that you think that I can help with, please shoot me an email, fatkiddanceparty@gmail.com. I love you very much, and I hope you have a great day.